through the day, we have had some excellent sessions, and I've heard most of them. And I've been asked to speak about the nephrologist perspective and our insight into the barriers and challenges into the various renal replacement therapy options, which include hemodialysis, home dialysis options, and renal transplant. A lot of it may be a little bit of repetition because I think Sister Malini covered it very well. Dr. Jhumar mentioned them, and of course, Dr. Kamal Shah just now illustrated extremely well the various issues. But from a doctor's point of view, many of it actually overlaps, but I will give my perspective. So I always begin with this slide. This World Kidney Day 13 years back, which was the first World Kidney Day. The slogan was the amazing kidneys. And kidneys perform a wonderful function of purifying about 200 liters of blood. And apart from the filtration function, the excretory function, it has endocrine functions. It secretes the hormones. It keeps our blood pressure normal. It keeps our acid base status and also keeps our bones healthy. So the kidneys do a wonderful job, and RRT really does not replace all the functions, but then yes, it helps in sustaining life. So the thing is that once you diagnose someone as CKD, as has been discussed earlier, CKD, if properly diagnosed, is a progressive condition. And ultimately, all patients would need RRT. And of course, they would come to the nephrologist if they're referred well in time, and then they need to be prepared. And this has been mentioned by one of the speakers, prepared mentally, physically, by creation of vascular access and apart from other parameters. Socially, because that's very important. Ultimately, it is those patients who do well who have a very good social backup system, and financially, because finances play a very important role. And that's why they should be referred early to a specialized center. Now, just to give a brief overview of the situation around the world, that what are the patients who have failed their kidneys, who are on ESRD, what are the various treatment modalities and what percentage, what is the spectrum? So as you will see, about a quarter, this is the US data, of course, a few years back from USRDS, that about 25 to 30% patients are transplanted. They're very lucky to live with a transplant kidney. Large majority in the US are on hemodialysis, and a very small proportion are on peritoneal dialysis. So these are the three options which we will be discussing as well. So it's good to, of course, the percentages vary from place to place, country to country, but roughly this is the thing. And of course, in some centers where it's PD first policy, it would be reversed. PD would be more and HD would be less. Transplantation is roughly about 25 to 30%. A lot of things has already been discussed, but I thought I'll show you some of my old pictures because it tells us the facts that, as has been discussed repeatedly, that the first thing which happens, which is a challenge that we face, is a denial of diagnosis. So it's very important to explain to the patient that it's a progressive nature of disease and that they should come to us regular intervals, maybe 3 monthly initially and more frequently subsequently. One should create a fistula at the earliest, and that ultimately dialysis would be required. To show us some old pictures that before, earlier when patient came late, we had the shunt, which is no longer done. And then even now, when patient crash lands into the dialysis unit, patient cannot, sit up, is not fit for putting a tunnel catheter, then you have to go in for a femoral access. So, this is what I tell all my patients, that you should not get into this business of having a femoral here and a jugular there, because then that is not only painful, it is troublesome, it creates infections, and it's a lot of headache. So one should avoid this as much as possible. So initially, the patient may have to have a non-tunnel catheter, and a non-tunnel catheter has its own share of problems, which we nephrologists see day in and day out, which all my colleagues would be aware that it causes, apart from infection, it can cause stenosis of the central veins, which can lead to dilatation of the veins all around, and of course failure of subsequent access, including a fistula. So we do not want a non-tunnel catheter at all in the first place. What we would like to have is a tunnel cuff catheter as far as possible, and of course best thing is an AV fistula. So as a nephrologist, the most important challenge is that to get the patient to accept the diagnosis, come for regular follow-ups, make a fistula at the appropriate time. And of course, the other option would be a graft, which has its own share of problems as well. Funding is an issue, and as we discussed this morning in the technicians conference, we had a lovely debate of twice a week versus thrice a week dialysis, how there are some cost saving issues, there are many issues, and then of course whether dialysis should be reused or it should not be done. So I'm not going to the details about that. That has been discussed extensively, but as a nephrologist, I'll say again and again that the bane of our patients is this low sodium, high potassium salts. You know, there are posters all over the town in all medical journals that high potassium, low sodium salts improve cardiovascular survival. And there's a recent NEJM paper as well from China in this regard. But then for our patients, it can be life threatening. And so they should be counseled repeatedly by us as well as the dietitians that it's a strict no-no. The low protein diets has also been discussed very well, and it leads to malnutrition, especially in our patients who anyway take less proteins, and malnutrition increases mortality. In fact, we have the reverse epidemiology paradox as well. So we do not want our patients to be malnourished. Now, once a patient is on dialysis, I think the important issues that we face apart from the other medical issues is the skipping of the sessions. I mean, even if they are on supposed to be on thrice a week, many of them would skip the sessions. They will not inform the dialysis unit in time, and that leads to a loss of valuable slot as well. Fluid compliance. And this would, of course, be a problem if patient is on twice a week dialysis. It's important to tell the patient that 1.5 kilo at max 2 kilos should be the intradialytic weight gain. And so fluid compliance is very important. And of course, it will depend upon his residual renal functions. Medicine compliance, blood pressure medications, all these things need to be addressed, and it's an important issue. Mr. Kamal addressed this issue about fertility, and so in females, I mean, fertility is definitely reduced in patients on hemodialysis. Pregnancy is very rare, but may occur, and if it occurs, then of course, I mean, the overall outcome may not be that good. I mean, pregnancy may not last, or the child may have IUGR, and it's anyway very rare. For males, libido is reduced. There's lots to say on hemodialysis. I will stop there, and of course, the esteemed nephrologists and panelists are there who can chip in and add to other issues on hemodialysis. Coming to the home dialysis options. Now, home dialysis obviously would mean the peritoneal dialysis and the home hemodialysis. To give a perspective again, you see in the US, home dialysis, that is including both the above two, is about 12%, maybe 13 now. In Hong Kong, it's 85% because there is a PD first policy. So as you can see, it's a huge range. In the US now, a study has shown that they're spending more money on treatment of renal failure and dialysis than the National Institute of Health, Department of Homeland Security, and NASA combined. So, I mean, there's a lot of money which is required by our CKD 5D patients. And so 2 years back, the then President of US, Donald Trump, signed an executive order to increase home dialysis in US to as much as 85% by 2025. And this had four important parameters. One is to promote prevention of renal disease through increased public awareness, support for living donors through better compensation for the costs involved, increasing the supply of diseased donor organs, and encourage development of wearable or implantable artificial kidneys. So, Kamal mentioned regarding this some WhatsApp which are circulating, but at least I do not think in the next 5 years, this would really become a practical thing because clinical trials have to be done in detail before one can really go on to the artificial kidneys. So home dialysis is now being given a lot of importance the world over, and let's hope that in the near future we'll have more of home dialysis. Peritoneal dialysis would be manual, where the patient has to perform 3 to 4 exchanges per day, and as I mentioned, I mean, it requires time. Half hour is the bare minimum, maybe it'll take 45 minutes per exchange. So, I mean, for a working person, that is difficult. Or you have the option of the automated PD or the cycler PD. The manual CLPD exchanges comes roughly the same as much as hemodialysis, whereas the automated PD is definitely much costlier. As has been mentioned, PD is less. In fact, it is even going down now because of easy availability of hemodialysis facilities now in our country, thanks to various free government funding schemes by various states. There are trust hospitals which provide very good dialysis at low or no cost, and the standalone centers. PD has also the problem that many of the patients are unwilling to do the procedure themselves. I mean, they are frightened or they don't want to do it themselves. And even when PD is done, most of it is by the caregivers. So it's caregiver assisted PD. And then, I mean, when you're not doing your own procedure as it's done in the West, then there are cutting corners, there are more chance of infection because the caregiver may change from time to time. So at least I like to always dissuade patients from having a caregiver assisted PD, but then that is a practical reality in our country. So that's where the role of very good patient education and counseling comes in. And this has been mentioned earlier. I'll just reiterate here that it's very important to have home visit PD nurses. This is how good PD program works the world over. But in our country, I think this is sadly lacking. We do not have a very organized program of home visit PD nurses, and we are dependent mainly on the industry clinical coordinators. And so the infection rate probably is higher. From a medical point of view, I'll say that it's unfortunate that in our country we have a high rate of high culture negative peritonitis, and that is not good. It also leads to more catheter loss, this technique failure, and overall, even the world over, the attrition rate of PD is definitely much higher than HTP due to various reasons. The membrane may not work anymore. There, there is failure of PD as a technique, or the catheter doesn't work. There's infections. So even USRDS data after 3 to 4 years, just about 30-35% patients remain on PD, and long-term PD patients are few. But having said all that, I think it is an excellent modality, and it should definitely at least be tried in the initial stages for a few years when the renal function is still good because it preserves residual renal function. So at least I encourage all my patients for peritoneal dialysis. Monitoring, at least for the APD patients, has now become easier because there are various online systems of various companies, Claria being one of them. So the doctor in his clinic or at home can monitor all the APD patients and see their clinical parameters and metabolic parameters. We have seen this diagram, and this is the diagram I always show my in all my talks. As you can see here, this elderly lady who crash landed into dialysis needed initially renal catheter. I always make a fistula if there is no heart failure, and the patient wanted a PD. Because in the PD, as I said, it's a little fickle. I mean, it may or may not work at times. So it's always good to have a fistula as a backup if there's no contraindication. So as you can see here, there are three accesses in the same patient, and of course this would be taken out, and then patient would go on PD after 2 weeks and have a fistula as a backup. Many disagree on this, but at least I am a strong proponent of having a fistula in all patients in late CKD 4-5, whatever be the subsequent modality of RRT that we choose. This is the APD machine that I was talking about. So patient can do night dialysis for 8 hours and be free during the daytime. So good for working people as well as for school children. So it's an automated PD. But then in a country, automated PD is very costly, and unless it is reimbursed out of pocket, I don't think it is possible. Now, a lot of things have been spoken about home dialysis, and I will just speak a little bit about it. That was first introduced actually way back in '61 from a modified washing machine. Then the programs took up in Seattle, Boston, and London, and it was mainly used for nocturnal hemodialysis for long duration. And even I was surprised that as per the US data, by mid 70s, 40% of the DSKD patients were on home hemodialysis. And then there was a rapid decline in the 80s and 90s. And now there is increased popularity because of better outcomes with longer and frequent dialysis sessions. And currently, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand have got very good home hemodialysis programs. The idea behind having home hemodialysis is basically self-cannulation, as Mr. Kamal mentioned, that it's important that the patient does it himself and does everything, but then that doesn't happen because the idea was to give them either short daily dialysis or long nocturnal dialysis, which would improve the metabolic parameters, BP control, reduce LVH. Obviously, if you're having a technician coming and doing both these things would not happen. So this was the basic idea, and of course, it would reduce chances of infection. For the younger people, improve quality of life, save travel time, and employment would become much easier. They could have short day dialysis. And for the elderly, especially with mobility problems, I think home dialysis is an excellent option. The two ways it is done, it has been discussed, I think, but I'll just reiterate here the mobile vans, which are fully equipped. There are vans in Delhi and in Mumbai as well, or you could have a home installation. The cost is approximately this, which I have confirmed from various sources, is about 5,000 if it is a mobile van. It will be higher if it is a home installation where the machine is not yours. It has been leased out. So there it's about 6,800. Vascular access is a fistula or it could be a catheter. It's probably better. Chances becomes easier. But the main thing is that in our country, we do not have the self-monitoring of these patients. So this is what we're lacking. And so the patient would have to call a nephrologist. If there's a problem, dialysis would have to be stopped and here have to come to the hospital. So it's a dream coming true. The private companies are participating, insurance is reimbursing, and Mumbai has quite a few. Delhi also has some. Now coming to renal transplant, uh, there are some absolute contraindications. As a nephrologist, one must first be sure that the kidney disease is not reversible. No? So if there's reversibility, then one can wait, and then there is no active malignancy, HIV, untreated, etc. It's important as a nephrologist to find out the cause of the native kidney disease. Often it is not possible because the patient presents too late, and that can be a problem afterwards. In diabetics, one has to take very special care to see how much cardiovascular workup should be done, whether angio should be done in the recipient or not. Look for a cerebrovascular disease. So diabetics are now a large number. So I mean, one has to pay special attention to diabetics before transplanting them. Living donor. I mean, the whole team must be very careful that the relation which they have claimed is correct. Otherwise everyone gets into trouble. And this has happened in all the major cities. And then, of course, ABN compatible is now possible, which is a very good thing. Most important, donor should come to no harm. So one has to follow a protocol and see that he is fit and one does not take without investigating properly. But then, as you can see, that worldwide, I mean, the number of people awaiting transplant is getting more and more, and so the waiting time is also getting longer and longer. And more the dialysis time, the more the dialysis vintage, there's a transplantation has a worse outcome. Funds are an issue, but then the government does provide. It's very important to have very good immunological workup, and for cadaver transplant, it's important to have a calculated PRA, which is not possible in our country because the population genetics data are not there. What induction therapy to give to all or not, this the nephrologist has to decide. Often there is some controversy there. Very good post-transplant follow-up is required with the renal function, stack level, very good infection surveillance. Otherwise they can have so many infections, viral, bacterial, BK virus, etc. Medication compliance is a very big issue, and this needs to be taken into consideration. It's a very big challenge. But as has been said, and I'll reiterate that definitely it's the best RRT option, and our longest survivor is now 42 years and still doing very well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think the take-home message which I feel is that of all the major organs, we should be thankful that renal replacement therapy for the kidneys is widely available. The other organs are not that lucky. But all the modalities of RRT have very unique challenges, and so one has to address them appropriately at all levels. Doctors, as Manisha said very rightly, that doctors have to concentrate on their work and others have to concentrate on theirs. Only then you have appropriate results. Patient education is of great importance, and here is the role of patient educators, education in the clinics, as well as in special programs like the World Kidney Day and school health education programs. Thank you very much for your time.